I'd start out talking about failure by failing miserably in front of you so that we'd all sort of get moving in the spirit. I installed Ubuntu yesterday on my netbook and did a really bang-up job of it, wiping out the other partitions in the process and having sort of a cluttered up version of Ubuntu. And so I have no idea what I'm doing. I'm not really an Ubuntu user. I've monkeyed with it before. And now I'm trying to get it to display.
If you just click send image and then apply, and then it should mirror the two.
Come on, be nice. Oh. Yay. Well, sort of. Does it look all right for you? Looks terrible for me, but that's fine. Keep this. You go away.
Yeah, probably you can.
Yeah, and now I'm going to use, I just learned it from the previous talk. I went in and played with my shortcuts, and I will switch workspaces. Crap, my app disappears. Well, that's not funny.
You're failing, though.
God. See, no, I was serious about the failure thing. That's just mean-spirited Ubuntu. It just ate my computer, ate my presentation. So yeah, I apologize for this. And of course, I had to set it up to make it as hard as possible. So I installed it yesterday. It's a poor install. I installed Wine today because I discovered that you can't run Windows executables. And then I had read in the Prezi forums that if you try to full screen a Prezi presentation running in Wine, which of course I had to just try just to see if it would work, it actually locks up the entire operating system. So if I were to go view full screen right now, bad things would happen. So all I can do is maximize and pray to God that it works. Come on, go away. Be gone, advertising. This is not how it's supposed to behave. Well, whatever. I'm just gonna make it work. It's working, and you can see it. So, anyways, the moral of the story was I wanted to fail so that I could make it real and personal and whatnot. I wanted to talk about this because I think that in libraries it's sort of pathological to talk about, especially going through strategic planning exercises, to talk about being risk tolerant and supporting innovation and experimentation, but in practice, many libraries, this is not the right crowd to say this in because I think everybody here sort of self-defines as somebody who would buy into what I'm saying, so maybe I'm just preaching to the choir, but you got to preach somewhere.
Tell it.
It's going to get recorded and go on the web, that's why, you know. And then you won't throw things at me. Other audiences will throw things at me or accuse me of all sorts of things. But in reality, libraries are really pretty poor at being risk tolerant and are really bad at accepting failure and sort of managing as part of the way of doing business. So who in the room here, and I mean it in a work sense, in a personal sense, I hope we've all failed at some point, just epically, but in a work sense, you know, and I want to see hands here. Come on, let's get into the spirit here, you know, preacher style. Who has experienced an epic work failure? Yeah, okay, if your hand's not up, you're a liar. Who documented their failure? Yeah, all right, the brave few. I've never done it. God, I run from it. And if you've documented it, of those who raised their hands, if you've documented it, have you done so publicly? Yeah. Oh, one.
No one raised my hand.
Gold star. And the last question for the last hand standing was, how is that treated in your organization?
I don't know whether I've never had an organizational response.
Okay. Because my theory would be if they responded, they'd spin it into a success, especially in good old library style. Well, that's done, but we won, and it was great, and our users loved it, which of course they don't. So anyway, so this is all about fun with failure, or sticking a fork in things, because I think there are so many things in libraries that need a big fork stuck in them, and it's time to start doing it. And so I'm going to mention some of the things that should have forks stuck in them, I hope, in the next 4 minutes or so. Speaking of epic failures, I was like thinking yesterday, what's the most epic failure I could think of? And I was sitting next to Dan, and I said, oh, what's that bridge called that did that? Well, of course, the video won't play now. Because I'm standing in front of you, so the video had to fail. But you know what this bridge does. It goes woo, and the cars go crazy, and it collapses. And I'm thinking, if you're the engineer, you kind of had to document this because there was a camera running. You know, somebody got to know what, you know what you did wrong, so you don't do this again. This is a really good example. Love it. Wish the video would play. It's in the Internet Archive. You can go see it. You've seen it before. So I'm just going to make some basic points about failure. One is that I think we should iterate our interfaces in libraries a lot more frequently than we do. And that's tied up with failures. We just admit that something's not working. It's not necessarily a failure, but it's failing to do the job. We chuck it. We move to the next thing. Why don't we do this in libraries? I hope everybody has an answer so sad and upset with us if we take away their precious baby. We only wish our websites were their precious babies, that they would care if we took them away. In reality, most users could care less if we changed our website. Notwithstanding the few cranky people who write us emails about whatever we change. We don't like the color on that wall, it makes me angry. There's always a few of those, but really when we talk about users writ large in our libraries, users don't get upset by iterating. And so the question I would ask is, who's really, really confused by these changes? We know who they are. They work in our buildings. We are those people. I hope we've all been guilty at one point of saying, no, please don't change that thing. Especially in libraries, it's all about, well, we've built this house of cards, we've built this empire around this kludgy service, please don't take it away. And so that's no reason. We should really just start moving on from some things. One of the examples, I'm going to go to Mulligans in a second. One of the examples was every library has subject guides in some form or another. They call them different things in different places. Subject guides are like the ugly stepchild of libraries. They sort of just live there on the website. We've poured our heart and soul into them. I've created subject guides, so I'm speaking as someone who's invested intellectual effort in creating these. Users don't care. They don't look at them. And why do I know this? Because for a better part of a decade, I've been a web manager in academic libraries, and I can look at server logs, and I can tell you, users don't care about subject guides. And if they do, track those IPs and see who those users are. They're probably within your subnets. So we should just stop already. Just move on from those kinds of things. As far as the other part of this, I was iterating, is we should allow ourselves mulligans. Does everybody know what the metaphor of what a mulligan is? It's a golfing thing. Like if you take a bad shot, you can say, I want to take a mulligan to get your shot over again. I don't golf, but I like the idea of a mulligan. In life in general, it's like, I didn't mean to say that. It was really hurtful, but oh, give me a mulligan. Or, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to slam into your car, but give me a mulligan. We should do this a lot more in libraries and just say, well, we thought that was a good idea. It wasn't. Or we took something away and we didn't really mean to. Well, we'll put it back. Maybe we should try that more often. So I like the idea of mulligans as a management tool. Something we do a lot in libraries, we all have whips. We've all got our whips out flogging the dead horse, trying to keep stuff alive. And this is where I start sticking forks in things and naming names. And so as far as dead horses, what falls into the category of dead horses? IRs, not all of them. There's a concept behind what has become the canonical institutional repository, which is a good and useful thing. Capture the intellectual output of an enterprise, manage it, make it available. That's all good. But in practice, how many people are affiliated with the institution that has a thriving IR serving the purpose for which it was created? Who? Anybody want to raise their hand? Yeah, okay, I thought so. And of course, the classic example, I saw a tweet the other day, thanks an archivist for this one. This is Princeton's, of course, Bill. We all recognize the screen design, guess what software it's running. And when you go browse by title, you get this result. Seriously, you publicly expose something called data space with your name on it, with 16 documents in 2011? Stick a fork in it. Hide this. Admit failure. Something's not working. Now maybe they've abandoned politics behind this. Maybe Princeton's doing it somewhere else. For God's sake, shut the door on this. This is ridiculous. Princeton only has 16 things. Well, I used to work at Yale, so I can say something really nasty right now about Princeton, but it wouldn't play so well. So I'll just leave that. But I will say something nasty about Yale, too. Not about them, but something they do. Anybody know what this software is? If you recognize it from the screen design, you get a gold prize. You're cheating. It's MetaLib. MetaLib, federated searching v1. Let's broadcast out through XML gateways and Ethernet 950 and make users wait forever for results to come back so that they can see a bad deduped set of garbage. I was part of the implementation when I worked there years ago. This is the point. This is my point here. I worked here years ago, and I was part of the implementation team that brought this upon the Yale users. It hasn't been usable since the day we launched it. Thanks, Dan. It hasn't been usable since the day it failed its first usability test. It's probably still failing usability tests. It's 7 years later. It's 2011, and this is still in use? I mean, seriously, this is a failure. We should just really just kill it. And Mita's talk earlier, we've talked on the phone about this, was really useful for me. The discovery layers that we have nowadays are sort of just, they're federated search in v2, but they're shot full of flaws and holes, one of which is, of course, the enormous price tag that's attached to them. So really, I think we should just be pulling the plug on these things and move on. And another thing, and this was another talk, your talk earlier, it was sort of allied to that, so I'm going to poke a little bit, but it wasn't quite what you were showing that you were doing. One of the things in academic libraries that users want, as reported by librarians and desk staff, is people want new books lists. What have you acquired recently? How many people have ever heard the wish to have new books lists? If you've worked at, yeah, okay, a lot of us. And a lot of people tie themselves enough to create these. Our ILSs don't really do it native very well, and so the place I used to work before I came here, the programmer and I sat down and I spec'd it out, and he wrote the code to make this really slick new books generator that would just, it was kind of awesome, we thought, as a tool. And we put it out there for the public, and we marketed the heck out of it. And years later, we had maybe like 15 custom feeds. We could actually create an RSS feed for an individual user based on LC classes. It was kind of fancy pants. 15 users, most of whom were either librarians, library-related people like my wife, so I made her take one, whether she wanted it or not, and a few other people that we knew that we could like dragoon into taking one of these custom feeds. That's another thing that needs to have a fork stuck in it. And I don't just mean that product, which is a shame because it was so elegant. The whole concept, the next time someone comes to me and says we need a new books list, I'm just going to say, you can't convince me. That's a concept that needs to have a plug pulled on. So, and it's not just a technology thing. I'm picking on technologies here, but really, it's all sorts of things. It's our services, it's our resources, and I mean what we buy and what we license. Well, we buy that because we're an academic library. We buy that because we're a public library. Well, of course we have to have these books, or of course we have to have these journals. Of course we have to keep these series up. Why? How we use our spaces, so on and so forth. So this isn't just a technology thing, although I'm sort of hitting that hard. You don't get to whitewash your failures. That's what I meant when I said earlier when meetings with the last 10, it's like, what did your organization do with the failure? A lot of times it's like, well, it was a success. No. It was a failure, and it's okay to call it that. Don't whitewash it into being something that it wasn't, and that's what happens. A lot of organizations, and I think in particular in libraries, we have to stare at failure. I don't mean to pick on this person, but he was making that gun thing, and it just drives me nuts. So it's like we have to stare it down and say, you're a failure, and I'm going to take you down. And so that's kind of what we have to do. We can't just run away from it. So why do we fail at failing in libraries? And I have two reasons for this that I'll mention. One is, I think, poor management in libraries. In general, we don't have it has to start from the top. Ultimately, where are consequences coming from? If you bomb something, it's not going to be at the developer level that you're going to flog yourself and punish yourself. It's at the reward structure level of the organization. What'd you do last year? Well, I tried this and it didn't work. I tried this and it didn't work. And I tried this and it didn't work. And I learned an enormous amount. So what comes next year will be great. Well, who's going to get a good evaluation for that? In most places, it's going to be sort of what have you done for me in the last 12-month period from April 1 until May 30. We define these things too rigidly. So there's something of a management failure here. And one of the things that I like to pick on is this concept of what I would call the legacy administrator, someone who's not used to sort of the modern, I don't want to even say Web 2.0, sort of the modern way of just iterating services, that you just sort of crank stuff out and kill it almost as fast as you create it. They're sort of still stuck on these very antiquated ways of doing things, and we need to get away from that. And the other reason we fail, and this hit me earlier during a couple of talks, is, and I'll just put the blame on ourselves for signing these contracts, but the other reason we fail has to do with vendors. And the things we obligate ourselves to do because we sign contracts with vendors that lock us into software. Overlays, catalog overlays. I was talking with a break with me about catalog overlays. Well, why doesn't the library's catalog just work like ViewFind? Why isn't it ViewFind native in the product? Why are we still using an OPAC that was architected in 1996 and has nominally been updated so that it now supports CSS? I mean, I actually saw a press release 3 years ago from Ex Libris about Voyager 7 coming out, and they were all excited about the fact that they had actually assigned classes to elements on the screen so that you could actually do CSS customization in 2008, and that was a big deal. It's kind of embarrassing. So I'm just going to push some of this back onto our vendors. But really, ultimately, we're to blame, again, in libraries, because we sign on the dotted line and obligate ourselves to these things long term, and we really ought to stop doing that. And I've heard that a lot today, sort of implicit in many talks, and that push up into organizations. So nothing horrible for my presentation, and I'm done. Thanks.